So the last video that I actually want to make today is about something that's interesting. I was having a conversation with one of my coworkers today. He's this Mexican guy who works with me, and he's also a server, and he's very interesting. Um so it was like a few weeks ago I started talking to him about how, I get a lot of people think that I speak Spanish, like I'm African, I'm not Spanish. And I went down a whole rabbit hole. I had to explain that to him. And then, I talked to him about, I've talked to some of you guys about this, but I moved to Tennessee from California. And in California, a lot of people actually do speak Spanish because what you have to take a foreign language class in high school. And the most common foreign language that you would take is Spanish. So obviously I took Spanish. So yes, I did speak Spanish pretty fluently by like sixth grade. Um, and but when I got into adulthood and I got into a pretty serious relationship, I was dating this Puerto Rican guy, and it was just so bad. I've made some content about that relationship here. There's still parts of my life that are impacted by the awful relationship that I had with this guy. So I'm telling my coworker about all, like, just I gave him like three instances that were like a bit over the top of like why I think Puerto Rican guys are so bad. And it was super interesting because he started telling me like, yeah, no, like that the whole culture is kind of like backwards. And he basically started describing to me almost like the like Latinx politics, which kind of describe like different cultures and, why some men from other cultures like treat their women really poorly, and how like it isn't this whole like all the Latinx groups aren't the same, right? Like it, but there are kind of a lot of similarities amongst some of the groups, and some of the other groups aren't, privy to. And so there's all of these things that I didn't know. Like I feel like I have been talking very blanketly about like Mexican culture and really Latinx culture, and kind of clumping a lot of people together. And I feel like it's most of it has been because of like my extremely bad experience with like one member of the Latinx community, it wasn't just one, it was kind of a few. And it made me feel really like skeptical, and continuing to talk to this guy. And today we basically had this whole conversation about how the fresh and fit guys have been demonetized on YouTube. And I was watching Abin Preach's video, and so he started, like, he looked at it and he identified them too, and he said, not Abin Preach, but the Fresh and Fit. He said he'd seen a couple of clips from them. And then I was like, oh, so you're one of those guys. You're like an alpha male, an alpha toxic male. And he's like, no, no. Like, I don't actually agree with like everything that they say. I think that some of it is very disrespectful to women. But there are some of the things that they say about, these Instagram girls and the women, like women culture. It was more about like, um, how do you say it, like a non-prudency. I think what he was getting at is like sexual freedom, and saying that that is going a little bit like overboard. He also started talking a bit more about like all of these how can you say it, like standard norms for males, and how he felt like a lot of men have become just so effeminized. And he started talking about how like men and women are equal now. He really feels that men and women are equal. Women have all of these rights now, and I was just kind of like listening. And I really had to make it a point to describe to him, like I'm a feminist, and like, like I definitely see the strides that, women have had to make. And then I just had to really explain that like women are only 35% of the workforce. And he was like, yeah, most women don't like to work. And I was like, okay, well that's interesting, because like that's true and non-true. And I felt like it was just necessary for me to make the point that like a lot of the women who aren't working are in relationships with poor men. And so even them not working, like they actually need to be working, because like them not working is causing them to like live in this impoverished situation, which is probably very detrimental for their mental health. It's pretty detrimental for like the family dynamic and them being able to raise successful families. There's just a lot of things that go into like the women in those households not working, and how it actually isn't good for the home. But I wonder how, this guy seems like a very interesting character. And I wonder how like I thought it was so interesting. Like, even one thing I remember when I first met this guy, you know, and I told him I was like Habesha, and he's like, "Oh wow, I can definitely see it." And he was talking about like my big ass forehead and my hair. He's like, "Yeah, you definitely look African. I can tell." And it was funny to hear that from like to me, he doesn't even really look like a Mexican guy. He looks kind of like Italian a bit, like very like olive skin, dark hair. I don't know, whatever. Maybe I don't know a lot of the cultures anyway. But it was very weird. So for him, in his mind, like African women look like me, and then in Kodak Black's mind, African women are these like disgusting bottom feeding women, and all of it is just interesting, and especially for the black women on this channel who are like following me, I just want you to like hear that. And isn't that interesting? So it's like, so men who aren't even black kind of like realize distinct cultural features that identify black women and are like, uh, yeah, right. But another thing I will say that is kind of interesting, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. It's a very weird thing though. Like, people are distinguishing black Americans from African women. And basically, so African women are now pretty, but like black American women are like not. Like, black American women are, ugly, ratchet, ghetto, dirty. And then African women are like beautiful, womanly, cultural, exotic, or something. Um, I'm not really sure. I think here's what I honestly think. I think that a lot of African women have just been in homes raising families for so long that society doesn't actually know what these women are like in the world, because there are no examples of them because they're just literally at home raising their families. And so whoever has been out here, like the Cardi B's, the Lottos, whoever is out here who has the time to write these rap songs and promote these songs and shit, like, that's who society, is getting familiar with. But I don't think those women just don't represent, not most black women, not, they only really represent themselves. Because when you really think about it, who has the time? Like, even me making the time to get on here and make these videos takes a lot. It takes a lot. A lot. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.